The tears rolling down my cheeks were a masterpiece of performance art. Derek kissed my forehead, promising he would be back from London in 2 years. But his eyes were already checking his watch. The moment his silhouette vanished behind security, I wiped my face dry. The grieving wife died right there, replaced by the woman who knew she had just transferred $650,000 out of his reach forever. My name is Elena Vance, and for the last 40 minutes, I had been delivering the performance of a lifetime. The departure hall at SeaTac International Airport was a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, crying toddlers, and the droning announcements of delayed flights. But my world had narrowed down to the 6 feet of space between me and my husband, Derek. I buried my face in the crook of his neck, letting out a ragged, shuddering breath that I had practiced in the mirror just an hour before. I made sure my shoulders shook just enough to sell the image of a heartbroken wife sending her beloved husband off across the Atlantic. I could smell his cologne, a scent I used to associate with safety, but which now only smelled like deception and the expensive perfume of another woman. "It is going to be okay, Elle," Derek murmured, his hand patting my back with a rhythmic, mechanical dullness. There was no warmth in it. It was the way one might pat a dog to get it to stop barking. "It is just 2 years. We will video chat every single day. You know I have to do this for the company. Nebula Dynamics needs a foothold in London, and I am the only one who can lead the expansion." "I know," I sobbed into his coat, my voice muffled. "I am just going to miss you so much." I pulled back slightly to look at him, my eyes swimming with genuine tears, not of sadness, but of the sheer physical effort of keeping my rage contained. I watched his face. He was handsome, in that polished, corporate way that aged well, but I saw the cracks. I saw the way his eyes darted over my shoulder to the clock on the wall above the security checkpoint. I saw the slight twitch in his jaw, a telltale sign that he was impatient, that he wanted this scene to be over so he could walk through those gates and begin his new life, his real life. "You should go," I whispered, wiping a tear from my cheek with a trembling hand. "You do not want to miss your flight." "You are the best wife a man could ask for," he said, and the lie slid out of his mouth as easily as oil. He kissed me, a quick, dry press of lips that felt more like a seal on a contract than an act of affection. "Take care of the house. I will call you as soon as I land." He grabbed the handle of his carry-on, turned, and walked toward the TSA checkpoint without looking back. I stood there, watching him. I waited. I waited for the hesitation, the glance over the shoulder, the wave. The old Derek, the man I thought I married 6 years ago, would have turned around. He did not turn around. He merged into the line of travelers, adjusting his coat, his posture straightening with a palpable sense of relief. He was free. He thought he was leaving behind a weeping, naive woman who would keep his home warm and his bank account active while he played house in London. The moment his silhouette disappeared behind the frosted glass of the security barrier, the transformation was instantaneous. I straightened my spine. The slump in my shoulders vanished. I reached into my purse, pulled out a tissue, and wiped my face with a precise, clinical efficiency. The tears stopped, as if I had turned off a faucet. The vulnerability that had defined my features moments ago hardened into something unrecognizable. My eyes, previously soft and pleading, turned cold and sharp. I adjusted the collar of my trench coat, turned on my heel, and walked toward the exit. I did not look back either. The walk to the parking garage was a march. I moved through the automatic doors and into the gray, drizzling Seattle afternoon. The cool air hit my face, drying the last remnants of the salt on my skin. I reached my car, a charcoal Audi that I had bought with my own bonus check 3 years ago. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather creaking softly under my weight. The interior smelled of vanilla and order. It was my space. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Allowing myself one scream. It was a silent scream, trapped behind my clenched teeth, a release of the poison that had been building up in my blood for 3 months. Then I exhaled. I keyed the ignition. The engine purred to life. I did not drive toward our house in Bellevue. I could not go back there yet. That penthouse was filled with the ghosts of a lie. It was filled with the things we had bought together, the life we had built, and the invisible stains of his betrayal. Instead, I navigated the Audi onto the highway, merging seamlessly into the traffic, heading toward a quiet, industrial neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript coffee shop that I knew would be empty at this time of day. It was a place for college students and freelancers, not the high society circles Derek desperately craved. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and found a table in the back corner, away from the windows. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed, reflecting in my eyes. I was not just a scorned wife, I was a senior financial analyst. I managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars for some of the wealthiest families in the Pacific Northwest. Derek had forgotten that. He saw me as a trophy, a housekeeper, a dry money-making machine, as he had so eloquently put it in the recording I had heard. He forgot that I knew how money moved. I knew how to make it grow, and I knew how to make it disappear. I navigated to the login page of our primary bank. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed in my username and the password. Then came the two-factor authentication prompt. My phone buzzed. I entered the 6-digit code. Because I handled all our finances, because Derek was too lazy to be bothered with admin work, I held the highest level of administrative access on all our joint accounts. He had never asked for the login. He just swiped the card. The dashboard is loaded. I stared at the numbers on the screen. Total available balance: $650,450. I took a sip of the bitter coffee, letting the heat burn my throat. That number represented everything. It was not just currency. It was the $400,000 I had received from the sale of my grandmother's apartment, a woman who had raised me when my parents died. A woman who taught me never to depend solely on a man. The rest was my savings. The accumulation of 6 years of 60-hour work weeks. Bonuses I had scrimped and saved while Derek spent his on designer watches and golf trips. He thought this money was ours to fund his new life in London. He had already made plans to use it for a down payment on a flat in Kensington. He thought he could drain it slowly, keeping me in the dark until he was ready to serve me papers. "Not today, Derek," I whispered to the empty room. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I initiated a new transaction. Destination: a private account at a bank in Zurich, Switzerland. An account opened under the name Elena Vance, my maiden name. An account that existed outside the jurisdiction of U.S. community property laws for the immediate moment. An account he did not know existed. Amount to transfer: $650,440. I left exactly $10 in the account. It was petty. Perhaps leaving zero would have been a technical error. Leaving $10 was a message. It was enough to buy a bad sandwich at the airport. It was enough to keep the account open so that when he checked it, he would see the balance staring back at him, mocking him. I hovered my finger over the confirm transfer button. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, the war was officially open. There would be no reconciliation, no working it out. This was a nuclear strike on our marriage. I thought about the photos I had found. I thought about the way he looked at Isabella in those pictures, a look he hadn't given me in years. I thought about the way he had smiled at me at the airport, lying to my face without blinking. I pressed enter. The screen processed for a few agonizing seconds. Then, a green check mark appeared. Transfer successful. The money was gone. It was safe. It was mine. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I closed the banking tab and immediately opened my contact list. I scrolled down to a number saved simply as Sterling. Arthur Sterling was not a kind man. He was not a therapist. He was a shark in a $3,000 suit, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases where the parties wanted blood. I had put him on retainer 2 weeks ago, paying him in cash. I dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Vance?" His voice was gravelly, professional, and devoid of unnecessary pleasantries. "He is gone, Arthur," I said, my voice steady and cold. "He is in the air." "Time of departure?" Sterling asked. 10 minutes ago. Flight to London Heathrow." "Excellent," Sterling said. I could hear the rustle of papers on the other end. "The jurisdiction clock starts now. We filed the motion in King County Superior Court within the hour. By the time he lands, he will be served via email and through his company's legal department. I have moved the funds," I added. "All of it. I left $10. Sterling let out a short, dry chuckle. "Ruthless. I like it. We will frame it as asset protection due to suspected dissipation of marital funds. Given the evidence you provided regarding his gambling debts and the gifts to his mistress, we have a strong argument to hold that money in escrow or under your control until the settlement." "Do it," I said. "I want the credit cards frozen, the ones attached to my credit line. He has a supplementary card he uses for emergencies. Cut it. Consider it done. Anything else?" "I want him to have nothing. Arthur, when he lands in London, I want him to realize that his credit is dead, his bank account is empty, and his wife knows everything. I want the shock to hit him before the jet lag does. We are proceeding immediately. Stay safe, Elena. Do not engage with him if he calls." "He will not be able to," I said. I hung up the phone. I picked up my smartphone. I opened our text message thread. The last message from him was from yesterday. "Can you pick up my dry cleaning? Love you." I stared at it for a second, feeling a wave of nausea. I didn't delete the thread. I needed it. I needed every lie preserved. Instead, I went into the settings, block caller. I went to WhatsApp, block. I went to FaceTime, block. I went to Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, block, block, block. I scrubbed my digital presence from his life in under 2 minutes. The only line of communication I left open was my email address. I needed him to be able to write to me. I needed a paper trail of his reaction. I needed him to incriminate himself when the panic set in. I wanted his threats, his begging, his gaslighting. I wanted it all in writing, time-stamped and admissible in court. I closed the laptop and sat back in the chair. The coffee shop was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the espresso machine and the rain tapping against the window. I felt lighter. The heaviness that had been crushing my chest for months began to lift. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. The woman staring back at me was not the weeping wife at the airport. She was a warrior who had just fired the first cannon shot in a war she intended to win. I took a final sip of my black coffee. It tasted like victory. "Welcome to the rest of your life, Elena," I whispered to myself. I packed up my laptop, walked out to my Audi, and prepared to drive into a future that was finally, terrifyingly, and wonderfully mine alone. The game had begun, and Derek did not even know he had already lost. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, the silence pressing against my eardrums. When the doors slid open, the apartment greeted me with its usual pristine, suffocating perfection: white marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray Seattle skyline, and the scent of expensive reed diffusers that smelled like nothing in nature. I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot across the cold stone. It was empty, finally, truly empty. For the last few weeks, the air here had been thick with Derek's lies, but now, the silence was honest. I poured myself a glass of water, leaning against the kitchen island, and let my mind drift back, not to the airport, but to the moment the ground had actually crumbled beneath my feet. It was 3 months ago, a Tuesday, to the outside world. Derek and Elena Vance were the golden couple of Bellevue. 6 years of marriage. He was the charming executive at Nebula Dynamics, climbing the corporate ladder with a winning smile and a firm handshake. I was the financial wizard, the woman who turned portfolios into gold mines. We were successful, childless by choice, or so we told people, and seemingly inseparable. Our friends envied our vacations, our cars, the way Derek would place a hand on the small of my back at dinner parties. It was all a carefully curated performance. And I had been the most devoted audience member until a simple technological glitch tore down the curtain. Derek had been working late that night. He was always working late recently. I was in the living room, reading on the shared iPad we kept for controlling the smart home system and browsing recipes. I was looking for a risotto recipe when a notification popped up at the top of the screen. iCloud sync complete. 452 new photos added. I frowned. We shared an iCloud account for convenience, mostly for vacation photos and house documents, but Derek hadn't taken any photos recently, or so I thought. I tapped the notification, expecting perhaps screenshots of work presentations or maybe pictures of a site visit. The first image that loaded was not a spreadsheet, it was a selfie. Derek, shirtless, laughing, with the sheets of a hotel bed pulled up to his waist, and next to him, her head resting on his bare chest, was a girl. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the iPad. My brain simply stalled, trying to process the visual data that contradicted my entire reality. I swiped left. Another photo. This one was at a dinner table. Candlelight. A bottle of Dom Perignon. The girl was holding a glass, looking at Derek with heavy-lidded adoration. I recognized her immediately. Isabella, the 24-year-old administrative assistant Derek had hired 6 months ago, the one he had described to me as bright but a bit overwhelmed. I swiped again, and again, and again. There were hundreds of them, a chronological documentation of a betrayal. Here they were at the Fairmont in San Francisco during his tech conference last month. Here they were at a spa in Napa Valley when he was supposedly on a team-building retreat. The timestamps were damning. Every late night, every business trip, every emergency meeting was accounted for in high-definition color. My hands started to tremble, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. It wasn't just the sex, it was the intimacy. There were videos. 2. I clicked on one. Say hello to London, baby. Derek's voice boomed from the iPad speakers. He was panning the camera around a hotel suite I didn't recognize. Stop it, Derek, Isabella giggled. Swatting at the camera, she was wearing one of his dress shirts. My husband's shirt. When are we going to tell her? The camera flipped to Derek's face. He winked. Soon. Just let me secure the transfer first. Then we are free. I sat there on the sofa, the iPad heavy in my lap, feeling the blood drain from my face. The sheer stupidity of it was almost insulting. He had a second phone, a burner likely, but he had logged into our shared cloud account on it, probably to upload a document, and forgot to turn off the autosync. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi had done the rest the moment he walked through the front door. Technological incompetence had destroyed my marriage. Most women would have waited for him to come home and screamed. They would have thrown vases, demanded answers, cried until their eyes were swollen. But I am a financial analyst. I deal in risk assessment, asset management, and damage control. Panic is a luxury I do not afford myself. I put the iPad down. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. Then, I went back to the living room, picked up the iPad, and downloaded every single photo and video onto an encrypted external hard drive. Once the transfer was complete, I deleted them from the iPad in the cloud. Scrubbing the evidence of my discovery, he could not know that I knew. Not yet. Information is leverage, and right now, I have none. The next day, I hired Raymond. Raymond was a private investigator who looked like a retired accountant, unassuming, quiet, and terrifyingly efficient. I paid him a retainer that cost more than my first car, and I gave him one instruction: find out the exit strategy. I knew Derek. He wasn't impulsive. If he was talking about London and securing the transfer, he had a plan. I needed to know what it was. 2 weeks later, Raymond met me in a dim diner on the outskirts of Tacoma. He slid a manila envelope across the table and a small USB drive. It is worse than you think. Mrs. Vance, Raymond said, his voice devoid of pity. He knew I didn't want pity. I wanted data. I plugged the drive into my laptop right there at the table. It contained audio recordings. Raymond had bugged Derek's car and managed to get a long-range microphone on them during a lunch date at an outdoor bistro. I put on my headphones. The audio was crisp. I heard the clinking of silverware and the ambient noise of traffic. But Derek's voice cut through clearly. "The London expansion is approved," Derek was saying. "2 years. That is the contract. But I am not coming back. Bella. Once we are there. The laws are different. It is harder for her to touch me." "But what about the money?" Isabella's voice was high, whining. "You said we would buy that townhouse in Kensington. That is £3 million. Derek." "I have it covered," Derek replied, and his tone was so arrogant, so dismissive, it made my stomach churn. "Elena has that inheritance money sitting in the joint savings. Plus, I have been moving liquidity around. I am going to use the joint funds for the down payment. By the time she realizes I am filing for divorce, the money will be tied up in foreign real estate. She can try to sue me from Seattle, but good luck getting a British court to liquidate my primary residence quickly. I will drag it out until she settles for pennies." I paused the recording. My hand was gripping the mouse so hard my fingers ached. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to rob me. He was going to take the money my grandmother left me, the money meant for our future children, for our retirement, and use it to build a love nest with a 24-year-old secretary. But the next part of the recording broke something inside me that could never be fixed. "Do you feel bad?" Isabella asked. "I mean, she is your wife," Derek laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Elena, please, she is a robot, a dry, money-making machine. Living with her is like living with a calculator. She checks the stocks before she kisses me good morning. She has no passion. Bella, not like you. You make me feel like a king. She makes me feel like an employee." I took the headphones off. The diner was blurry, a dry money-making machine. I had supported him when he was unemployed for 8 months 3 years ago. I had paid off his student loans. I had managed our investments so we could afford the lifestyle he demanded. I had worked 60-hour weeks to ensure we were secure, and to him. That was being a calculator. I looked at Raymond. "Is there more?" "Check the financial report in the envelope," Raymond said. I opened the paper documents. My eyes scanned the lines of credit and bank statements. Raymond had dug up accounts I didn't know existed. Derek had been busy. He had taken out a second mortgage on a rental property we owned in Portland without my signature forging it. Most likely. He had drained that equity line of credit. "Where did the money go, crypto?" Raymond said, pointing to a line item. "He put $200,000 into some obscure altcoin 6 months ago. The market crashed. He lost 80% of it." "He is trying to recover his losses," I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "That is why he needs my inheritance. He is in the hole. He is broke." "He is worse than broke," Raymond corrected. "He is underwater. If he stays here, the debt collectors come for the house, the cars. He needs to run. London isn't just an affair. Mrs. Vance, it is an escape route." I closed the folder. The grief I had felt earlier evaporated. In its place, a cold, crystalline clarity formed. He wanted to go to London fine. I would send him there. He thought I was a calculator. Then he was about to learn that calculators do not have mercy. They only have results. I went home that night and performed the greatest acting role of my life when Derek came through the door, smelling faintly of Isabella's perfume. I greeted him with a smile. I cooked his favorite meal. I listened to him complain about his boss. And then, over wine, I planted the seed. "You know, honey," I said, twirling the stem of my glass. "I was reading about the market trends in Europe. London is really the place to be right now for tech dynamics. I feel like you are being wasted here in the Seattle office." Derek's eyes lit up. He looked at me, surprised. "You think so?" "Absolutely," I lied smoothly. "If Nebula Dynamics offered you a position there, you should take it. It would be good for your career, and honestly, maybe the distance would be good for us. We have been so stressed lately. You could go, get settled, and I could join you in a few months once I wrap up my projects here." I watched the gears turn in his head. I was handing him exactly what he wanted on a silver platter. He didn't have to fight me to go. He didn't have to make excuses. I was practically packing his bags for him. "You are amazing, Elle," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I was actually thinking the same thing. There is a director position opening up there. I could apply. Do it, I urged him. Go get what you deserve. Go get what you deserve. The irony of those words tasted sweet on my tongue. For the next 2 months, I played the supportive wife. I helped him shop for coats suitable for the English weather. I listened to him talk about the great opportunities awaiting him. I watched him text Isabella under the dinner table, knowing he was telling her, "She is letting me go, it is perfect." I let him believe he was the mastermind. I let him believe he was outsmarting the dry machine. Meanwhile, I was moving pieces on the chessboard. I started consolidating my assets. I scrutinized every bank statement, finding the exact dates he had siphoned money for his gambling and his mistress. I built a dossier that was thicker than a phone book. I found the clause in his employment contract regarding ethical conduct and financial impropriety. I found the contact information for the head of integrity at Nebula Dynamics' global headquarters. I drafted the anonymous whistleblower complaint, attaching the evidence of him using the company credit card for client dinners that were actually dates with Isabella. I saved it as a draft, ready to send. I watched him pack his bags this morning. I watched him slip the passport into his jacket pocket. I watched him check his phone, smiling at a text from her. He thought he was flying toward freedom. He thought he was flying toward a new life where he was the rich, successful king and I was a distant memory. I stood up from the kitchen island in the empty penthouse. The flashback faded, leaving me back in the cool, silent present. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Derek was sipping champagne in business class, holding Isabella's hand, thinking he had won. He had no idea that he wasn't flying to a new beginning. He was flying into a trap I had spent 90 days constructing. "Enjoy the flight, darling," I whispered to the glass, "because when you land, the ground is going to disappear." I turned away from the window and walked toward the bedroom. I will have a busy day tomorrow. I had to meet with real estate agents to list the penthouse. I had to finalize the transfer of the Audi title. And I had to wait for the email I knew would come, the inevitable, panicked scream across the ocean when the first card of his house crumbled. The dry machine was done calculating. Now, it was time to execute. The office of Arthur Sterling was exactly what you would expect from a man who charged $800 an hour to dismantle lives. It smelled of mahogany, aged scotch, and the faint, metallic scent of fear left behind by previous clients. I sat in a leather chair that was comfortable enough to relax in but stiff enough to keep you alert. Sterling sat across from me, a stack of documents arranged with military precision on his desk. He did not smile. Sterling did not smile unless he was watching an opposing counsel realize they had made a fatal error. "The papers were filed electronically 18 minutes ago," Sterling said, his voice a low rumble. "The moment the timestamp was confirmed, the clock stopped on your marital assets. Anything he spends from this second forward is legally contested debt." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. "And the grounds? Adultery, irreconcilable differences, and most importantly, dissipation of marital assets," Sterling replied, tapping a finger on the thick file I had provided. "The evidence your investigator gathered is substantial. The crypto losses, the unauthorized withdrawals, the jewelry receipts. It paints a clear picture of financial misconduct. We are asking for a temporary restraining order on all remaining assets to prevent further depletion." "He will not see it until he checks his email," I said. "He is currently somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean." "Which gives us a tactical advantage," Sterling said. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "We have triggered the freeze on the credit cards, specifically, the ones where you are the primary account holder and he is the authorized user. That includes the black card he uses for impressing people." I allowed myself a small, cold smile. That card was his pride and joy. He loved the weight of it, the way waiters raised their eyebrows when he slapped it onto a tray. He didn't seem to care that the bill was paid automatically from an account funded largely by my bonuses. "Cut it," I said. Cut them all. Done, Sterling confirmed. Now, regarding your living situation, you cannot be at the penthouse when he realizes what has happened. Even if he is in London, he has friends here, he has a temper, and legally, it is better if you have established a separate residence to reinforce the separation date. I am way ahead of you, I replied. I left Sterling's office and drove straight to the property management office of our building. I had already reviewed the lease terms. Since the lease was in my name, Derek had bad credit when we moved in. A detail he conveniently forgot when bragging about our penthouse. I had the unilateral right to terminate with a penalty fee. I wrote a check for 3 months' rent as a penalty. It was a painful amount of money, roughly $15,000, but it was the price of erasing my footprints. I need the locks changed immediately, I told the manager. And I am vacating the premises today. If Mr. Vance attempts to enter, he is no longer a tenant. You are to treat him as a trespasser. By 2 p.m, a discreet moving company had packed the few things I actually cared about: my clothes, my grandmother's jewelry box, my personal files, and the artwork I had purchased before the marriage. I left the furniture. I left the expensive espresso machine Derek loved. I left the bed we had shared. They were tainted. I wanted none of it. I drove to my new sanctuary. It was a serviced apartment in a building called The Fortress, located in the downtown financial district. It lived up to its name. Keycard access for the elevator, 24-hour concierge security, and no guest entry without direct authorization. It was sterile, modern, and safe. I set up my command center on the glass dining table, my laptop, my secure phone, and a bottle of Pinot Noir. I was not drinking to celebrate. I was drinking to steady my nerves for the next step. The final bridge needed to be burned. I opened my email client and composed a new message. The recipient was Linda, the Director of Human Resources at Nebula Dynamics. We had met at several company holiday parties. She liked me. She thought I was sharp. I attached 3 PDF files to the email. During my forensic audit of our accounts, I had found something that went beyond simple marital betrayal. Derek had been sloppy. He had charged personal expenses to his corporate expense account, disguising them as client entertainment. The dinners with Isabella were labeled as prospective client meetings. The hotel rooms were site logistics, but I had cross-referenced his calendar. There were no clients. More damning was the invoice I had found for a market research consultant. He had billed the company $12,000 for a report. The money had gone into a shell company account that I traced back to a crypto wallet he controlled. He wasn't just a cheater, he was an embezzler. I typed the subject line, Confidential Internal Financial Irregularities / Derek Vance. The body of the email was professional, detached, and lethal. I wrote that as a financial professional. And in the process of separating my finances from Mr. Vance, I had discovered discrepancies that I felt legally and ethically obligated to report to avoid any liability falling upon myself. I framed it as self-preservation, not vengeance. I hit send. That email would land in Linda's inbox just as the London office opened. By the time Derek walked into the Nebula Dynamics branch in London, the red flags would already be waving. I sat back and watched the clock. It was 8 p.m. in Seattle. That meant it was 4 a.m. in London. They would be landing soon. I switched my attention to the banking app on my phone. I had set up push notifications for every single transaction attempted on the cards I had just frozen. Now, I just had to wait. I imagined the scene as if I were watching a movie. I knew Derek's routine so well I could choreograph it in my mind. The plane would touch down at Heathrow. Derek would be the first one to stand up when the seatbelt sign turned off. Impatient. Important. He would turn on his phone immediately. He would expect a stream of texts from me. Did you land safely? I miss you already. Call me. He would see nothing. Isabella would be next to him, stretching, looking tired, but excited. She would be expecting a private driver, a luxury suite, the beginning of her Cinderella story. My phone remained silent for an hour. Customs and baggage claim. Then, the first notification popped up on my screen. Alert transaction declined. Uber, UK. Amount £85. I let out a breath. It had begun. He must have tried to order an Uber Black to take them to the hotel. The card was linked to his profile. It failed. He probably frowned, cursed the banking app, and switched to a different card. Alert transaction declined. Uber UK. Amount £85. That was the second card. The backup. I could see him standing on the curb outside Heathrow. The grey London drizzle misting his expensive coat. He would be tapping furiously at his screen. Blaming the glitchy system, Isabella would be shivering, asking why the car wasn't there yet. He would probably snap at her, telling her to be patient. They likely took a black cab. Cabs take cash. He had about $400 in cash in his wallet. That would get them to the city, but it would eat a chunk of his liquidity. 40 minutes later, the next notification came. This was the big one. Alert transaction attempt. 6-car rental. Amount £2,400. Status declined. I closed my eyes and savored it. He wasn't just getting a taxi. He was trying to rent a luxury vehicle for the week. Something to show Isabella he was a man of means. A Jaguar or a Range Rover. I could visualize the scene at the rental counter. The polite British agent typing on the keyboard, then pausing, the frown. "I am sorry, sir, but the card has been declined. Do you have another?" Derek would laugh nervously. "That is ridiculous. I have a $50,000 limit. Try it again." Alert transaction attempt. 60-car rental. Status declined. "Sir, the issuer has placed a hold on the account. It is reported as lost or stolen." Derek's face would drain of color. Isabella would be standing behind him, leaning on the luggage cart, her patience thinning. "Derek, what is going on? People are staring." "It is a mistake," he would hiss. "My wife, she must have messed up the bill payment. Hold on." He would step away from the counter. This was the moment. He would open the primary banking app, the one shared account I had left accessible. The one he thought held the golden parachute was $650,000. I stared at my phone, waiting for the inevitable phone call. 3, 2, 1. My screen lit up. Incoming call, husband. I watched it ring. I did not decline it. I simply let it ring until it went to voicemail. He called again immediately. Incoming call, husband. And again. Incoming call, husband. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. I could feel it radiating across the ocean. He was staring at the screen, seeing that number, $10. He was refreshing the page, praying it was a display error. But the transaction history would be clear. Transfer to external account. Balance remaining $10. He was stranded in a foreign country. He had no car. His credit cards were dead plastic. His cash was dwindling. And the woman standing next to him expected a 5-star experience. I picked up my glass of wine and took a slow sip. I wondered how he would explain this to Isabella. Would he tell the truth, that his dry calculator wife had outsmarted him? No. His ego wouldn't allow it. He would lie. He would say it was a bank error, a fraud alert, a temporary freeze. But Isabella was young, not stupid. She was materialistic. She was there for the lifestyle, not the struggle. My phone buzzed with a text message this time. It was an email notification. Actually, since I had blocked his number. From Derek Vance. Subject: call me now. Body: Elena, pick up the damn phone. The bank accounts are empty. The cards aren't working. We are stuck at the rental place. Did you get hacked? Call the bank immediately and fix this. I need money transferred now. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another email. From Derek Vance. Subject: what did you do? Body: I see the transfer. What the hell is going on? Put the money back. That is my money. You are stealing from me. If you do not answer me in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. I laughed softly. The police. He was going to call the police to report that his wife moved marital funds while he was in London with his mistress. I wished he would. It would save me the trouble of serving him the papers. Then, a different notification. A social media alert. I had created a dummy Instagram account weeks ago to monitor Isabella's public profile. She had posted a story. It was a picture of her luggage on a wet sidewalk. No luxury car, no smiling selfie, just a caption London rain. Waiting for a ride, tired. There was no my love tag. No heart emoji. The cracks were starting. I finished my wine. It was getting late in Seattle, but my day was just beginning. I had stripped him of his armor. I had taken his weapon, the money. Now, he was naked on the battlefield. I walked to the window of my new fortress and looked down at the city. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was the cold satisfaction of a mathematician who had just balanced a complex equation. "Welcome to London, Derek," I whispered. "I hope you packed an umbrella. It is going to be a very cold 2 years." I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the city and the intermittent blinking of my phone, signaling his desperation, flashing in the dark like a beacon of my victory. I sat in the darkness of my new apartment, the glow of the city filtering through the sheer curtains. My laptop screen was the only source of harsh light in the room. It was past midnight in Seattle, which meant it was just the beginning of the business day in London. The timing was impeccable. Arthur Sterling, true to his word, had timed the delivery of the digital service packet perfectly, at exactly 8 in the morning London time, just as Derek would be waking up in whatever mediocre accommodation he had managed to scramble together. The email arrived in his inbox. It was flagged as high priority, legal correspondence, with a read receipt requested. I did not need the receipt to know he had opened it. I could feel the shockwave from 4,000 miles away. The subject line was simple: dissolution of marriage petition and temporary restraining order on assets. Vance versus Vance. Inside that PDF was the end of his life as he knew it. It laid out the freezing of our joint accounts, the petition for divorce based on adultery and financial misconduct, and the immediate revocation of his power of attorney. It was a legal straitjacket. The reaction was almost immediate. My inbox pinged, from Derek Vance. Subject: "Are you insane?" I took a sip of water, my hand perfectly steady. I opened the email. "Elena, I just got this garbage from some lawyer. What is wrong with you? Is this a joke? You froze the accounts. You left me with $10. I am in London for business. I have a partner with me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? You are acting like a lunatic. Unfreeze the money right now, or I swear to God I will call the cops and report you for grand larceny. You are stealing my money. That inheritance is marital property. You are going to jail. Elena, fix this, now." I leaned back, reading the words over and over. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was the one sleeping with his secretary. He was the one planning to abandon me. He was the one who had drained our equity. And yet, in his twisted narrative, I was the villain. I was a lunatic. He was trying to use fear, the same weapon he had used to keep me compliant for years. He thought that if he yelled loud enough, if he threatened jail and police, the quiet, submissive Elena would panic and hit the undo button. He did not realize that the woman he was emailing no longer existed. I hit reply. I did not type a paragraph. I did not justify my actions. I did not argue about the law or the definition of marital property. I simply attached a single image. It was a screenshot from the folder Raymond had given me. It was a transcript of a text conversation between Derek and Isabella from 3 weeks ago. Derek, don't worry about the old hag. Once we get to London, I will drain the joint account for the Kensington flat. She won't know until the check clears. We will leave her with nothing but the cat. Isabella. You are so bad. I love it. Below the image, I typed 2 sentences. The money was mine. I took it back. Enjoy London. I pressed send. That was the closure. That was the period at the end of the sentence. I imagined him staring at his phone screen, the color draining from his face as he realized that I hadn't just reacted blindly. I had been watching him the entire time. The old hag had read his script and rewritten the ending. I closed the laptop for a moment, letting my imagination travel across the ocean to reconstruct the scene playing out in London. Based on the declined transaction alerts I had received the night before, I knew they hadn't stayed at the Ritz. Derek's credit was dead. He had about $400 in cash. London is an expensive city. A $400 budget for 2 people does not get you a suite. It gets you a cramped room in a 3-star hotel near the airport or a questionable hostel. I checked Isabella's social media again. She had posted a photo of a breakfast plate, greasy eggs and toast with no geotag. But in the background, I could see the distinct beige pattern of a budget hotel chain's wallpaper. The caption read, "Rough start. Jet lag is real." The cracks were widening. What Derek didn't know, and what was about to destroy him completely, was that the financial freeze was only the first wave of the tsunami. The second wave was hitting right about now. It was 9 a.m. in London. Derek, desperate to regain some control and likely needing to secure a company advance to pay for a better hotel, would be heading to the Nebula Dynamics London office. I knew this because he had bragged about it for months. "I am going to walk in there and take charge," he had said. "The London team needs strong leadership." The reality, however, was a trap of his own making. The London expansion project was largely a fiction Derek had sold to the executives in Seattle. He had convinced them that there was a massive market opportunity and that he needed to be on the ground to secure contracts. He had fabricated projected revenue reports. He had practically willed the position into existence so he could use the relocation package to finance his escape with Isabella. But I had sent the email to Linda in HR. I could see him walking into the glass-fronted building in the financial district, wearing his best suit wrinkled, perhaps, from the cheap hotel room. He would approach the reception desk with that arrogant swagger, flashing his badge. "Derek Vance," he would say, "Director of Operations, U.S. Transfer." The receptionist would type his name. She would frown. The badge reader would flash red. "Access denied." "I am sorry. Mr. Vance," she would say, her voice polite but firm. "Your credentials are not active." "That is a mistake," he would snap, the stress of the last 24 hours boiling over. "Call the regional manager. Tell him I am here." And then, the security guards would step forward, not to welcome him, but to escort him. I knew exactly what was happening because an hour later, I received a blind carbon copy of an email from the London HR director to the Seattle headquarters. It was a standard protocol notification. Subject Incident Report. Derek Vance. Content, Mr. Vance attempted to access the London premises at 0900 hours. Per the directive from Global Security regarding the ongoing internal investigation into financial fraud and embezzlement. Access was denied. Mr. Vance was handed the notice of suspension pending investigation and escorted off the property. He appeared agitated and made verbal threats against the company. I smiled. The 2-year project wasn't just canceled. It was the crime scene. Derek had planned to use the company's relocation funds, about $50,000, to set himself up. He thought he would land, get the check, and then slowly fail at the job while living off the company dime before quitting. But by reporting his fraudulent expense reports and the fake consultant invoices yesterday, I had triggered an automatic suspension. There would be no relocation check, no company car, no per diem, no corporate apartment. He was in one of the most expensive cities in the world with no job, no access to his wife's money, and a mistress who was expecting a shopping spree. I could only imagine the conversation when he returned to the hotel. Isabella was not a woman built for adversity. I had seen her credit reports. She had maxed out 3 cards before she even met Derek. She liked nice things. She liked stability. She did not like paying for a damp hotel room with her own money. I pictured Derek walking into that small, beige room. He would be sweating, his tie loosened, the smell of failure clinging to him. "We need to talk," he would say. "Did you get the money?" Isabella would ask, looking up from her phone. "I found a better hotel in Chelsea, but they need a deposit." "There is a slight complication," Derek would mutter. "The company there is a mix-up. They are auditing the accounts. My corporate card is frozen too." "What?" Isabella's voice would rise. That sharp, nasal whine that used to grate on my nerves during company parties. "So how are we paying for this, Derek? I just paid for the room last night with my personal card. You said you would pay me back today. I will, I just need time, Derek would shout, the pressure valve bursting. Why is everyone pressuring me? My wife is trying to ruin me. The company is screwing me over, and now you are nagging me about a few £100. A few £100. Isabella would stand up, her face flushing. I came here to be with a successful man, not a broke loser who gets kicked out of his own bank account. You told me you were rich. Derek, you told me she was the one holding you back, but it looks like she is the one who had all the money. That line, that specific realization, it must have cut him deeper than any knife. Don't you dare talk about her. Derek would defend himself, but weakly. I am the victim here. She hacked me. She is a thief. She is smart, Isabella would scream. She played you, Derek, and you dragged me into it. I am stuck in London. I have no job. And now I have to support you. No way. The walls of that cheap hotel must have shaken with their argument. It was the sound of a fantasy disintegrating upon contact with reality. Their relationship was built on the shaky foundation of deceit and materialism. Remove the money, and there was nothing left but two selfish people trapped in a room together. Back in Seattle. I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. I had been afraid for so long, afraid of losing him, afraid of being alone, afraid of the humiliation of being cheated on. But as I sat there, stripping him of everything he valued, his status, his wealth, his ego, I realized that I wasn't just punishing him, I was liberating myself. He was stuck. He couldn't buy a ticket home because he had no credit cards and no cash. He couldn't work because his visa was tied to the job he just lost. He was a ghost in a foreign machine. I checked my email one last time before bed. There was a new message from a notification service I monitored. Alert new inquiry on your credit report. It was a payday loan company in the United Kingdom. Derek was trying to take out a high-interest loan. Status rejected. Due to frozen assets and active litigation flag. He was flailing. He was drowning. And for the first time in 6 years. I wasn't going to dive in to save him. I was going to stand on the shore and watch. Good luck, Derek, I whispered to the empty room. You wanted a new life. You got one. I stood up and walked to the bedroom of my fortress. The sheets were cool and clean. I laid down, and for the first time in months, I did not cry myself to sleep. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the righteous. The war was far from over. He would come back. He would fight. He would try to hurt me, but the first battle was a decisive massacre, and I was the one left standing. 3 days after I detonated the nuclear bomb on my marriage, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. It was a United Kingdom country code. I stared at it for a moment, sitting in the quiet luxury of my new apartment, a glass of Pinot Noir resting on the coaster. I knew it wasn't Derek. I had blocked every avenue of communication from him except email, and he was currently too busy drowning in his own mess to find a burner phone. This was someone else. I swiped to answer, put the phone on speaker, and set it down on the marble table. This is Elena, I said, my voice calm, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. Mrs. Vance. The voice on the other end was shaky, high-pitched, and laced with the distinctive desperation of someone who had hit rock bottom. It is Isabella. I did not gasp. I did not recoil. I simply took a sip of my wine. I assumed it might be. To what do I owe the pleasure? Isabella, I imagine the weather in London is less than hospitable right now. He is crazy, she blurted out, her voice cracking. Derek, he is losing it. He is screaming at the hotel staff. He is drinking cheap vodka. He has no money. Elena, 0. I am aware, I replied. I made sure of that. I cannot stay here, she sobbed. I need to go home. I need to get back to Seattle, but I maxed out my cards paying for the first 2 nights. And the airline wants $2,000 for a last-minute ticket. I waited. I knew the pitch was coming. The transactional nature of their relationship had been exposed the moment the credit cards declined. And now she was trying to transact with me. I can help you, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I have his laptop password. I know where he hid the hard drive with the Nebula Dynamics files, the ones he stole before we left. If you buy me a ticket home, I will give you everything. I will testify. I will tell the court whatever you want. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city lights. It was pathetic. Really. She thought she was a player in this game, but she was just a pawn that had been knocked off the board. Isabella, I said softly, you seem to be under the impression that I need your help. I do not. I have the bank records. I have the emails. I have the receipts. I have won. The only thing you have that I want is distance. Please, she begged. I am scared. He is getting aggressive. Then call the police, I said coldly. If you feel threatened, dial 999. That is the emergency number in the United Kingdom. Report him for domestic disturbance. Report him for fraud. But do not ask me for money. I do not subsidize my husband's mistresses. You wanted him. Isabella, you wanted the trip. You wanted the lifestyle. Now you have the reality. Deal with it. I hung up. I did not feel cruel. I felt like a teacher who finally let a student fail a test they had refused to study for. But the chaos was far from over. In fact, it was about to go viral. While Isabella was begging me for a lifeline, Derek was desperately trying to secure one of his own. According to the updates I was receiving from our mutual acquaintances, who were all too eager to gossip, Derek had spent the last 48 hours frantically calling everyone he knew in Seattle. He called his college roommate. He called his old golf buddies. He called the guys he played poker with. He was asking for $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Just a temporary liquidity issue, he told them. Bank error. Crazy ex-wife froze the assets. I will pay you back double next week. It might have worked, had I not been one step ahead. The rumor mill in the corporate world moves faster than light. The news of his suspension from Nebula Dynamics for financial fraud had leaked. I had not explicitly told anyone, but corporate compliance investigations rarely stay secret. When people heard fraud and investigation, they closed their wallets. Sorry, man. Cash is tight right now. His poker buddy told him. I wish I could help, Derek, but we are renovating the kitchen. His college friend lied. Derek was radioactive. He was stuck in London with no job, no money, and a reputation that was disintegrating by the hour. And then, Isabella found the bomb. I learned about it the same way the rest of the world did. It was late evening in Seattle when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. It wasn't a private message. It was a live alert. Isabella_Queen is live. I tapped the notification. The video feed was grainy, lit by the harsh yellow light of a cheap hotel bathroom. Isabella was sitting on the edge of a bathtub, her mascara running down her cheeks, her hair a mess. She looked nothing like the polished, arrogant girl in the photos I had found on the iPad. She looked like a cornered animal. I am done, she said to the camera, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 40 people, 100 people, 300 people. I am done protecting him. I am done lying. She held up a piece of paper. It looked like a printed email or a digital receipt. Do you guys know what Derek Vance did? She screamed, her voice distorting the microphone. He stole my identity. That is what he did. I sat up straight. This was new information. I woke up this morning and found a notification on my phone, Isabella ranted. A loan application, £5,000, from a shady lender here in London. He used my passport details. He took my passport while I was in the shower and used my information to get a high-interest loan because his credit is trash. He forged my signature. I took a sip of wine. Oh, Derek, you fool. You desperate, arrogant fool. Identity theft in a foreign country. That wasn't just grounds for divorce. That was a felony. He told me he was rich, Isabella continued, laughing hysterically. He told me he was a big executive. He is a fraud. He is a broke loser. He made me pay for this disgusting hotel room. He has been begging his friends for money all day and crying when they say no. He is not a man. He is a leech. The comments section on the live stream was exploding. User 1, OMG, isn't this Derek from Nebula? User 2, I know him, he owes me $20 for lunch. User 3, this is tea. Spill it, girl. He dragged me to London for a fake job. Isabella yelled. There is no job. He got fired before we even landed. He lied to everyone. And now he stole my identity to pay off some thugs he borrowed money from on the first day I am going to the police right now. I am turning him in. Screw you. Derek Vance. I hope you rot. She ended the live stream abruptly. I stared at the black screen, feeling a strange mixture of awe and finality. She had done more damage in 5 minutes than a team of lawyers could do in 5 months. She had destroyed his social capital within an hour. The screen recording of the live stream was circulating on Twitter and TikTok. It had been reposted by a popular drama account with the caption, Tech exec scams mistress in London, the downfall. My LinkedIn inbox began to fill up with messages from mutual friends and colleagues. Elena, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Did you see the video? Is this true? We are here for you. Elena, I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need their pity. I was watching the execution from the VIP box, and the show was spectacular. But for Derek, the horror was just beginning. According to the timeline Isabella had revealed, Derek had borrowed money from thugs on the first day. This made sense. When his cards were declined at the car rental, he must have found a way to get cash to keep up the charade for at least 24 hours. He likely went to a predatory lender in the darker corners of London, promising to pay them back with his release funds that never arrived. Now, those lenders wanted their money. I could piece together the rest of the night through the fragmented updates I received from Raymond, who was still monitoring the situation remotely, and from the public fallout. Derek was evicted from the hotel. Isabella had followed through on her threat. She had reported the fraud to the hotel management and the police. The hotel, not wanting to be involved in a criminal dispute, threw them both out. Isabella, likely using the last of her credit, or perhaps finally getting help from her parents, went her own way. She left him on the sidewalk with his 2 suitcases and a debt he couldn't pay. Derek was alone. He had a watch, a Rolex Submariner that I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. It was worth perhaps $12,000. Raymond's contact in London reported seeing a man matching Derek's description entering a pawn shop in Soho late that afternoon. He walked out without the watch. Counting a stack of pound notes, it wouldn't be anywhere near the full-value pawn shops smell desperation like sharks smell blood, but it would be enough to keep him alive for a week. Next went the laptop, his customized MacBook Pro, the tool of his trade. He sold it at a second-hand electronics store. He was stripping himself of his identity piece by piece. The executive was gone. The husband was gone. The lover was gone. All that remained was a frightened man in a foreign city, hiding from creditors, hiding from the police, and hiding from the shame that was now trending globally on social media. I poured myself a second glass of wine. The apartment was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. I thought about the man I had married. I thought about the arrogance he displayed when he told Isabella I was a dry calculator. I wondered if he was doing the math now. He had traded a net worth of nearly $1 million, a loyal wife, and a prestigious career for a week of humiliation and a criminal record. I opened my laptop and composed an email to Arthur Sterling. Subject update on defendant's status. Arthur, please preserve the social media evidence regarding the defendant's admission of identity theft and financial fraud against his travel companion. It will be useful for the character assessment in the final settlement. Also, be advised that he is likely liquidating personal assets to survive. We need to ensure those are deducted from his share of the marital estate, if there is anything left. I hit send. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the reflection of the woman standing there. She looked strong. She looked liberated. Cheers, Isabella, I said to the empty room, raising my glass. You were the best investment I never made. somewhere in London, in a hostel room that smelled of damp wool and regret. Derek Vance was lying on a bunk bed, staring at a ceiling stained with water damage, listening to the sirens outside, and realizing that the nightmare was not a bad dream. It was his new life, and he had built it, brick by brick, with his own lies. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered not by a courier, but through an electronic service notification that pinged on my laptop while I was sipping my morning espresso. It was a legal filing from the United Kingdom. Derek had finally found a lawyer. Or, to be more accurate, he had scraped together the last of his pawned watch money to hire a solicitor who likely operated out of a basement in East London. The document was a petition for emergency relief and restitution of marital assets. It was poorly drafted, riddled with typos, and reeked of desperation. I called Arthur Sterling immediately. "I see it," Sterling said before I could even say hello. "Mr. Nigel Higgins." I looked him up. His primary practice areas seemed to be drunk driving defenses and petty theft. Derek is certainly scraping the bottom of the barrel. "He is claiming that I embezzled our joint funds," I said, scrolling through the affidavit on my screen. "He claims he is a victim of financial domestic abuse and that I have left him destitute in a foreign country, endangering his life." "It is a delay tactic, Elena," Sterling replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "He knows he cannot win on the merits. He is trying to clog the court docket to force a settlement. He thinks that if he makes enough noise, you will write him a check just to make him go away. He wants $10,000 released immediately for living expenses and legal fees." "He will not get a dime," I said, the familiar coldness settling in my chest. "When do we go to court?" "The hearing is set for Friday," Sterling said. "It will be a remote session via video link since the plaintiff is abroad. Get your forensic files ready. We are not just going to defend, we are going to bury him." Friday morning arrived with gray skies that matched the mood of the proceedings. I sat in Sterling's conference room, the camera positioned to show me sitting tall, composed, and impeccably dressed in a navy blazer. On the screen, the judge sat in her chambers, looking bored, and in a small, pixelated box in the corner, there was Derek. He looked terrible. The lighting in his location, likely an internet cafe or a cheap rented room, was harsh and unflattering. He had lost weight, his eyes were sunken, and he hadn't shaved in days. He wore a dress shirt that was clearly unironed. Beside him sat a man who looked like he had slept in his suit, Mr. Higgins. "Your Honor," Higgins began, his voice tinny through the bad connection. "My client is an American citizen trapped abroad. His wife, out of vindictiveness, has stripped him of all access to his own money. We are simply asking for a humanitarian release of funds so Mr. Vance can eat and pay for lodging." The judge looked at Sterling. "Counsel." Sterling stood up, adjusting his cuffs. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply held up a thick binder. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's claims rely on the assumption that the $650,000 in question is marital property. It is not. We have submitted Exhibit A, a comprehensive forensic accounting of the Vance household finances for the last 5 years. Sterling opened the binder. The funds transferred by my client were derived from 2 specific sources. First, $400,000 from the sale of a property at 42 Oak Street, inherited solely by Elena Vance from her grandmother. Under state law, inheritance kept separate is not community property. Second, $250,000 represents the cumulative savings from Mrs. Vance's personal bonuses and salary. During this same period, Mr. Vance contributed exactly $0 to these savings. I watched Derek's face on the screen. He was twitching, trying to whisper something to his lawyer. "In fact," Sterling continued, flipping a page, "Mr. Vance did not just fail to contribute, he actively drained the marital estate, which brings us to Exhibit B." This was the weapon I had been sharpening for weeks. My client discovered that Mr. Vance had taken out 3 separate business loans totaling $150,000 from regional banks. Sterling said, These loans were supposedly for real estate investments. However, upon investigation, the properties listed as collateral do not exist. They are ghost projects. The judge frowned, leaning closer to the camera. Ghost projects? Yes, Your Honor, but it gets worse. To secure these loans, Mr. Vance needed a guarantor. He used his wife's name. Sterling held up a document to the camera. It was a loan application. At the bottom was a signature, Elena Vance. I did not sign that, I said clearly, speaking for the first time. That is a forgery. My handwriting expert has already submitted a sworn affidavit confirming it. Derek traced my signature from a tax return. Derek jumped up in his chair, knocking into his lawyer. That is a lie. She knew about it. She is lying. Sit down, Mr. Vance, the judge barked, her boredom vanishing instantly. Mr. Higgins, control your client. Sterling waited for the silence to return before delivering the final blow. Your Honor, Mr. Vance has committed bank fraud and identity theft against his own wife. He used the proceeds of these fraudulent loans to gamble on cryptocurrency, a fact we can prove through blockchain analysis. The $650,000 my client secured is the only asset preventing the banks from seizing her personal property to satisfy the debts he illegally accrued in her name. If you release these funds to him, he will spend them, and my client will be left responsible for his crimes. The room went silent. On the screen, Mr. Higgins looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. He started shuffling his papers, mumbling something about needing time to review this new evidence. The judge didn't give him time. Motion for emergency relief is denied, she ruled, her voice sharp. The court finds sufficient evidence that the funds in question are likely separate property or are required to secure potential liabilities caused by the plaintiff. Mrs. Vance is granted a preliminary injunction to hold the entirety of the $650,000 in a trust account under her control until the final divorce decree is issued. Mr. Vance, I suggest you find a way to pay your own bills. The court is not your piggy bank. The screen went black. Derek was gone. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. Sterling closed the binder with a satisfying snap. He is done. Elena, he just lost his leverage. But the legal war was fighting on two fronts. While the civil court had shut off his money, the criminal consequences of his actions at Nebula Dynamics were finally catching up to him. 2 days after the hearing, I received a call from Linda in Human Resources. I shouldn't be telling you this, Elena, she said, her voice lowered. But I know what he put you through. You should know that the legal department has filed a formal report with the FBI regarding the embezzlement, because the amount exceeds $50,000 and involves interstate wire transfers. It is a federal crime. What does that mean for him? I asked. It means his passport has been flagged, Linda said. The State Department revokes passports for citizens with pending federal warrants or significant financial crimes who are deemed a flight risk. He is technically a fugitive now. The irony was suffocating. Derek had gone to London to escape his life in Seattle, thinking he would become a global citizen. Instead, he was now a prisoner of an island. He couldn't leave the United Kingdom because his passport would be confiscated the moment he tried to board a plane. But he couldn't stay there legally either, because his work visa had been sponsored by Nebula Dynamics, and they had just fired him for cause. He was in immigration limbo. He couldn't work. He couldn't rent an apartment. He couldn't open a bank account. He was a ghost. And ghosts, as it turned out, are not very attractive dating prospects. I kept tabs on Isabella, mostly out of habit, but partly to ensure she stayed neutralized. Her social media had undergone a drastic rebranding. The crying live streams were gone. The photos of Derek were deleted. In their place were photos of a pub in Camden, dark wood, neon signs, and a new man. He was older, thick-set, with tattoos on his forearms and a look of rough reliability. He owned the bar. I saw a photo of Isabella wiping down a table, captioned, "New Beginnings. Hard work pays off." She had survived. She had realized that Derek was a sinking ship and had grabbed the nearest life raft. Even if that raft was a bartender named Gary who let her sleep in the spare room above the pub. She had abandoned Derek completely. There was no loyalty among thieves, and there was certainly no loyalty among people who bonded over spending someone else's money. Derek, on the other hand, had no one. Raymond sent me a final report before I closed his contract. Derek had been kicked out of the hostel for non-payment. He was currently staying in a doss house, a boarding house for day laborers in a rough part of East London. He had developed a severe chest infection, likely from the damp and the stress, but without the National Health Service coverage or money for a private doctor. He was treating it with over-the-counter cough syrup and whiskey. I looked at the photos Raymond had attached. Derek sat on a park bench, his head in his hands. He looked 10 years older than the man who had left SeaTac Airport just a week ago. The arrogant executive was gone. All that was left was a man broken by his own greed. I felt a twinge of something not pity, but a recognition of the tragedy of it all. He had everything. We had everything, and he threw it away for a delusion. But I could not dwell on the wreckage. I had my own building to do, with the legal victory securing my finances. I was free to make my next professional move. The industry buzz about my departure from Derek and the subtle implication that I had outsmarted a fraudster had actually increased my stock. In the world of high finance, ruthlessness and competence are the most valuable currencies. I accepted a meeting with the CEO of Apex Capital, the direct competitor to Nebula Dynamics. The interview was short. "I heard what happened," the CEO said. "A woman with steel gray hair and eyes that miss nothing. You found discrepancies that an entire internal audit team missed. You protected your assets with the speed of an algorithm. I need that kind of sharp eye on my risk management team." "I am expensive," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Quality always is," she replied. I walked out of that meeting as the new vice president of risk assessment at Apex Capital, with a salary that dwarfed what Derek had ever made. But success is hollow if it is just for yourself. I remembered the feeling of helplessness I had when I first found those photos on the iPad. I remembered the fear of financial ruin. I knew there were thousands of women who didn't have my training, my resources, or my grandmother's inheritance to fall back on. I started quietly. I volunteered my Tuesday evenings at a women's shelter in downtown Seattle. I didn't hand out soup. I handed out knowledge. I ran workshops on financial independence and safety. I taught women how to check their credit reports for coerced debt. I taught them how to separate their finances before leaving an abusive partner. I taught them how to be invisible to the men who wanted to control them. Money is not just currency. I told a room full of tired, scared women one rainy night. Money is a wall. It is a shield, and you have to build it yourself, brick by brick, so no one can ever tear it down. I was building a new identity. I wasn't just Elena Vance, the scorned wife. I was Elena Vance, the survivor, the architect of her own salvation. As I walked to my car after the workshop, the rain felt different. It didn't feel gloomy. It felt cleansing. I was washing away the last sticky remnants of the past, across the ocean. Derek was likely shivering in the same rain, waiting for a dawn that would bring him no comfort. But here, in Seattle, the storm was just watering the seeds of the life I was about to grow. 6 months is a long time in the world of finance. Fortunes can be built, markets can crash, and empires can be restructured. But in the life of a man like Derek Vance, 6 months was evidently enough time to decompose. I had spent the last half year reconstructing my life with the precision of a master architect. My position at Apex Capital was solidified. I was no longer just the woman who survived a scandal. I was the woman who turned risk into revenue. I wore sharper suits. I walked with a stride that cut through the air. The ghost of the weeping wife at SeaTac Airport was gone, exorcised by hard work and the sweet, steady rhythm of success. But ghosts have a nasty habit of refusing to stay buried. The United Kingdom Border Force is not known for its patience. Derek's visa had expired. He had no employer to sponsor a renewal. He had no funds to prove he could support himself. And so, the inevitable bureaucratic gears ground him up and spat him out. He was deported. I did not know the exact date of his return, but I felt a shift in the air, like the drop in barometric pressure before a storm. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The Seattle rain was falling in sheets, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon. I was dining at the Capitol Grill with Marcus, a senior partner at my firm. We were celebrating the closing of a merger that had taken 3 months of grueling negotiation. "To the shark in the silk blouse," Marcus said, raising his glass of Cabernet. He was a gentleman, 50 years old, with silver hair and a laugh that made people trust him instantly. It was strictly professional, but we were laughing, relaxed, enjoying the warmth of the restaurant against the cold night outside. I didn't see him at first. I was facing the window, looking out at the street. A figure was standing under the awning across the road, huddled against the brickwork. He was wearing a hooded jacket that looked 2 sizes too big and soaked through. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. At first, I thought it was a homeless man seeking shelter. But then, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across him. For a split second, the hood fell back. My heart stopped, then hammered a single, violent beat against my ribs. The face was gaunt, the skin clinging tightly to the cheekbones. His hair, once perfectly coiffed and dyed a rich brown, was gray, long, and matted. He had a beard that was patchy and unkempt, but the eyes, I knew those eyes. They were sunken, rimmed with red, burning with a mixture of hatred and hunger that chilled me to the bone. It was Derek. He looked 20 years older. The swaggering executive who had flown first class to London was gone. In his place was a wreck, a man who had been chewed up by poverty and humiliation. "Elena," Marcus asked, noticing my sudden stillness, "is everything all right?" I blinked. Breaking the gaze, I looked back at Marcus and forced a smile. "Yes, I just thought I saw someone I used to know. It is nothing." But it was not nothing. Derek had seen me. He had seen the pearls around my neck. He had seen the expensive wine. He had seen me laughing with a successful man. And in his twisted narcissist mind, he didn't see a woman moving on. He saw a thief enjoying the spoils of war. He saw his money, his life, his happiness, all stolen and given to someone else. I signaled the waiter for the check immediately. "Marcus, I hate to cut this short, but I have a sudden headache. Would you mind if we called it a night?" I had my driver take a different route home. I checked the rearview mirror the entire way. My instincts were correct. The sight of me had snapped the last fragile thread holding Derek's sanity together. Later that night, the police scanner in the precinct nearest to my old penthouse crackled with a disturbance call. I learned the details the next morning from the detective who called me. Derek had gone to the penthouse. He had walked the 3 miles from downtown in the rain. He stood outside the building where we had lived for 6 years. He likely didn't know I had broken the lease. In his delusion, he probably thought I was sitting on his couch, drinking his wine. He waited for a resident to exit the parking garage and slipped in before the gate closed. He took the elevator up to the top floor. He went to our old door, Unit 401. He tried the keypad. The code was changed. He started banging on the door. "Elena, open the door. I know you are in there. Give me my money. You stole my life." He kicked the door. He screamed until his voice was raw, but I wasn't there. The door opened, but it wasn't me. It was a terrified young father holding a baseball bat, with his wife dialing 911 behind him. "Who are you?" the man shouted. "Get away from my house." Derek froze. He looked at the stranger. He looked at the apartment behind him. The furniture was different. The paintings were different. The reality hit him. I had erased him so completely that even his home was no longer his home. The sound of sirens approaching from the street below broke his paralysis. He turned and ran. He scrambled down the fire escape, slipping on the wet metal, fleeing into the alleyway like a rat. When the detective told me this, sitting in my office the next morning, I felt a cold shiver. "He is dangerous," Mrs. Vance, the detective said. He is desperate, homeless, and clearly unstable. You need to be careful. I am always careful, I replied. But Derek wasn't done. The failure at the penthouse only fueled his rage. He had nothing left to lose, and a man with nothing to lose seeks only one thing: an audience. It happened at 2 p.m. I was in the lobby of the Apex Capitol building. Walking toward the elevators after a lunch meeting, the lobby was a vast, echoing space of glass and polished stone, filled with people in suits, couriers, and clients. The revolving doors spun, and Derek burst in. He was a nightmare in the daylight. His clothes were drying on his body, stiff and stained. He smelled of old sweat and alcohol. Security guards at the desk stood up immediately, but he was fast. He spotted me near the elevator bank. "Elena!" he screamed. The sound tore through the polite murmur of the lobby. Everyone froze. He charged toward me. "You thief! You witch! Look at her! Look at this woman!" He gestured wildly at me, his eyes wide and maniacal. I stood my ground. I did not run. I signaled the security team with a calm raise of my hand. But Derek was already closing the distance. "She stole $650,000 from me," he yelled to the stunned crowd. "I was a director. I was a wealthy man. She ruined me. She framed me." He reached out, grabbing the sleeve of my blazer. His grip was weak, his hands shaking. "Give it back," he hissed, his face inches from mine. I could smell the decay on his breath. "Give me my money, Elena. I am starving. I have nowhere to go." I looked him in the eye. I didn't see my husband. I didn't see a monster. I saw a tragedy. "You did this to yourself, Derek," I said, my voice low and steady. "Let go of my arm." "I will kill you," he shrieked, raising a fist. But before he could strike, 2 large security guards tackled him. They hit him with the force of a freight train, slamming him onto the polished marble floor. "Get off me! I am her husband. I am Derek Vance," he wailed, as they pinned his arms behind his back. The lobby was silent except for his screams and the click of handcuffs. I looked around. Dozens of phones were raised. People were recording. The downfall of Derek Vance was being broadcast in real time. I adjusted my blazer, brushing the spot where he had touched me as if wiping away dirt. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right?" the head of security asked, breathless. "I am fine," I said loudly enough for the bystanders to hear. "Please remove this trespasser and call the police. I want to press charges for assault and harassment." They dragged him out. He was kicking and crying, his shoes squeaking against the floor, a pathetic figure leaving a trail of humiliation. I did not go home to cry. I went upstairs to my office and called Arthur Sterling. "I need an emergency restraining order," I said, "and I want the divorce finalized. Now, no more delays." "The incident at your office is already on the news," Sterling said. "The judge has seen it. We have an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. We are going to strip him of everything. Elena, parental rights if you had them, visitation, spousal support claims, everything. He just handed us the keys to his own coffin." The next morning, the courtroom was different. It wasn't the sterile, remote video call of the past. It was real. I sat at the plaintiff's table, impeccable in a charcoal suit. Derek was brought in by 2 bailiffs. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit from the county jail where he had spent the night after the lobby incident. He looked small. The fight had gone out of him. He didn't look at me. He stared at the table, his shoulders hunched. The judge, a stern man with no patience for theatrics, looked over the police report from the day before. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice echoing in the wood-paneled room, "you have violated the sanctity of this court's previous warnings. You have harassed the plaintiff. You have attempted to break into a residence. You have assaulted the plaintiff in her place of work, and you are currently facing federal charges for embezzlement." Derek said nothing. "I am granting the permanent restraining order," the judge continued. "You are to come nowhere within 500 feet of Elena Vance, her home, or her place of employment. Violation of this order will result in immediate imprisonment for a period of no less than 1 year." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Now, regarding the dissolution of marriage, the judge said, turning to Sterling. I understand there is a motion to finalize. Yes, Your Honor, Sterling said. Given the defendant's conduct and his squandering of marital assets, we move for a summary judgment awarding the entirety of the preserved $650,000 to Mrs. Vance as sole property and restitution. Derek's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender this time, didn't even stand up. He just nodded tiredly. So ordered, the judge said. It was over. As the bailiffs moved to take Derek back to the holding cell, he stopped. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. I expected hate. I expected anger, but what I saw was fear. Pure, naked fear. He realized that once he walked out those doors, he was going to federal prison, and then he would be released into a world where he was a pariah with $0 to his name. Elena, he whispered. It was a plea. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply looked at him with the detached curiosity one might have for a bug trapped in a jar. Goodbye, Derek, I said. The doors closed behind him. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, crisp sunlight of Seattle. The storm had passed. The air smelled of pine and wet pavement. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that felt cleaner than it had in years. The legal battle was won. The financial war was over. But as I walked toward my car, I knew that the final twist was yet to come. Derek was a cornered rat, and rats have a way of biting one last time before they die. I checked my phone. I had a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text. 3 words that sent a chill down my spine despite the sunlight. It isn't over. I deleted the message. Let him come. I had destroyed him once. I was more than ready to do it again. The courtroom air was stale, recycled, and thick with the scent of floor wax and impending doom. This was it, the final act. The summary judgment hearing that should have been a mere formality had turned into a theater of the absurd. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded neatly on the polished wood. Beside me, Arthur Sterling was checking his watch, the picture of bored competence, across the aisle. Derek sat alone. His public defender had withdrawn 2 days ago, citing irreconcilable conflicts of interest, which was legal code for, my client is lying to me, and I will not go down with him. Derek looked like a man who had been trying to glue a shattered vase back together with spit and desperation. He was wearing a suit that was clearly bought from a thrift store. The shoulders were too broad, the sleeves too long, and he was sweating. But there was a glint in his eye that I did not like. It was the frantic, manic energy of a gambler who believes he has an ace up his sleeve, even though the deck is missing. Mr. Vance, Judge Harrison said, peering over his spectacles. He was a man who had seen every variety of marital dissolution and had 0 patience for dramatics. You are representing yourself today. I would advise you to be brief. The evidence against you regarding the dissipation of assets is overwhelming. Derek stood up. He smoothed his tie with trembling hands. Your Honor, he began, his voice cracking slightly before he found his rhythm. I know how this looks. I know my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, has painted a picture of me as a monster, a cheat, a thief. He turned to look at me. He summoned tears, actual, wet tears. It was a performance that would have garnered applause in a community theater. But I am the victim here, he sobbed, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. I went to London to build a future for us. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I was unfaithful, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Elena is the one who destroyed our finances. She is the one who has been hiding money for years. I felt Sterling tense beside me. I remained frozen, my face a mask of confusion. She claims that $650,000 is her inheritance, Derek continued, his voice gaining strength. But that is a lie. That money was a loan from me to her. The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter paused. A loan? Judge Harrison asked, his eyebrows raising. Mr. Vance, we have 5 years of bank statements that say otherwise. Paper trails can be manipulated. Your Honor, Derek said, reaching into his oversized jacket pocket. But the truth cannot. 2 years ago, Elena's grandmother was sick. She needed specialized care that Medicare would not cover. Elena came to me. She was crying. She begged me to liquidate my personal crypto holdings, my early investments to help her family. I did it. I gave her the cash. And she signed this. He pulled a folded, wrinkled piece of paper from his pocket and held it aloft like a holy relic. A promissory note, Derek announced triumphantly. Dated June 15th, 2024. Signed by Elena Vance, acknowledging a debt to Derek Vance in the amount of $1 million, payable upon the sale of the grandmother's estate. A murmur rippled through the gallery. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the trap springing shut. I looked at Sterling. I widened my eyes. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I grabbed Sterling's arm, digging my fingers into his sleeve. "He is lying," I whispered loudly enough for the microphone to catch. "I never signed that." Derek smirked. It was a fleeting, ugly expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the mask of the grieving husband. "She is panicking because she knows it is real. Your Honor, she owes me $1 million. That's $650,000 in the trust account. It is just a down payment on what belongs to me." The bailiff took the paper and handed it to the judge. Judge Harrison examined it. He looked at me. He looked at the signature. "This appears to be a notarized document," the judge said, his voice grave. "The signature matches the examples on file." "It is a forgery." Sterling stood up, feigning outrage. "We have never seen this document before during discovery." "I found it in my storage unit yesterday," Derek lied smoothly. "I forgot I had it until I was looking through old boxes. It proves everything. Judge, she is a con artist, not me." For a moment, the air left the room. Derek was winning. He could see it in the judge's hesitation. He could see it in my apparent terror. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, a look of supreme satisfaction settling on his face. He thought he had done it. He thought he had checkmated the dry calculator. He did not know that I had already calculated the odds of him trying this exact move. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice dropping the act of outrage and shifting into a tone of deadly calm. "We anticipated that Mr. Vance might attempt to introduce creative evidence. Therefore, we have prepared a rebuttal." "Rebuttal?" Derek scoffed. "You cannot rebut a signed contract." "We would like to call 2 witnesses to the stand," Sterling said. "First, Dr. Eris Thorne, a forensic document examiner, and second, Miss Isabella Martinez." The color drained from Derek's face so fast, it looked like his blood had evaporated. He whipped his head around toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom. The doors opened. Isabella walked in. She looked different. The flashy clothes were gone. She wore a simple black dress and a cardigan. She looked tired, but her chin was high. She walked past Derek without looking at him. The sound of her low heels clicking on the floor was the only sound in the room. I found her 3 days ago. She was living in a small room above a pub in Camden, working for minimum wage, terrified that the British authorities were going to deport her just as they had Derek. I made her an offer I would buy her a first-class ticket back to the United States and grant her immunity from any civil lawsuits regarding the conspiracy to defraud me. In exchange for her testimony, she took the deal before I even finished the sentence. Derek stood up, knocking his chair over. "No, she is in London. She cannot be here. This is a trick." "Sit down, Mr. Vance," the bailiff barked, putting a hand on his holster. Isabella took the stand. She was sworn in. "Miss Martinez," Sterling said, pacing slowly in front of the witness box. "Do you recognize the defendant?" "Yes," Isabella said, her voice quiet. "That is Derek Vance, my ex-boyfriend. And were you with Mr. Vance in London approximately 2 months ago?" "I was. During that time," Sterling continued, "did you witness Mr. Vance engaging in any unusual activities in your hotel room?" Isabella took a deep breath. She looked directly at Derek. "Yes, it was our 3rd night. We were at the hostel because we had run out of money. He was frantic. He kept saying he needed a way to beat you to beat Elena. He bought a light box from an art supply store, and he had a stack of old tax returns he had stolen from the house before we left. What was he doing with them? He was tracing, Isabella said clearly. He spent 6 hours practicing Elena's signature. He had a sheet of yellow-lined paper. He wrote a note about $1 million. He said if he could forge her signature perfectly, he could claim the inheritance money was actually a loan repayment. He made me watch him. He asked me, "Does this look like her V? Does the loop look right?" "You are a liar," Derek screamed. "You are a jealous, crazy bee." "Silence," Judge Harrison roared, slamming his gavel so hard the wood splintered. "One more word, Mr. Vance, and you will be gagged." Sterling turned to the judge. "We also have Dr. Thorne, who has analyzed the ink density and pressure points of the document Mr. Vance just submitted. His report confirms that the signature is a simulation, a tracing, not a natural fluid motion. Furthermore, the paper itself, Mr. Vance, in his haste, used a brand of notebook paper that was manufactured only 6 months ago. The watermark date code proves it. It is physically impossible for this note to have been written 2 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. Judge Harrison picked up the promissory note again. He looked at it with disgust. Then he looked at Derek. Derek was trembling. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The fake tears were gone. The arrogance was gone. He looked like a child who had been caught standing over the broken vase with the glue still in his hand. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "did you submit this document to my court, under oath, knowing it to be a forgery?" I, Derek stammered. "It may be I got the date wrong, maybe." "Perjury," the judge said. "Forgery, attempted fraud upon the court." The judge pressed a button on his bench. The side doors opened, and 2 uniformed deputies entered. "Mr. Vance, your motion is denied with prejudice," Judge Harrison ruled. "Furthermore, based on the sworn testimony of the witness and the physical evidence presented, I am holding you in direct criminal contempt. Officers, take him into custody." "Wait!" Derek shrieked as the deputies moved in. "You cannot do this. It is a civil case. You cannot arrest me." "I can and I am," the judge said. "And I am referring this matter immediately to the district attorney's office for prosecution on felony charges of forgery and perjury. You tried to weaponize this court to facilitate a theft. Sir, I do not take that lightly." The deputies grabbed Derek. He struggled, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Elena!" he screamed, looking at me with wild eyes. "Elena, tell them it is real. Help me, please." I stood up slowly. I smoothed my skirt. I looked him dead in the eye. "I cannot help you, Derek," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "I am just a dry calculator, and the numbers just do not add up for you anymore." They cuffed him. The metallic click echoed off the walls. They dragged him toward the side door. He was weeping now. Ugly. Guttural sobs of a man who realized his life was over. He looked at Isabella, but she was looking at her hands. He looked at the judge, but the judge was writing on a file. The door slammed shut behind him, cutting off his wails. The judge exhaled a long breath and looked at me. "Mrs. Vance, I apologize that you had to endure that display. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The $650,000 remains your sole and separate property. The defendant is ordered to pay all legal fees, though I suspect he lacks the capacity to do so. The divorce is granted, effective immediately." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. "And Mrs. Vance," the judge added, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "That was extremely well prepared." "I like to be thorough," I replied. I walked out of the courtroom. Isabella was waiting in the hallway. She looked awkward, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Thank you," she said, "for the ticket, and for not suing me." It was a transaction, Isabella, I said coolly. You provided a service. I provided payment. We are even. Now, go back to Wisconsin, or wherever you are from, and learn to earn your own money. I didn't wait for her response. I pushed through the double doors of the courthouse and stepped out onto the wide stone steps. The sun was blindingly bright. The air tasted sweet. I took my phone out of my purse. I opened my banking app. Balance. $650,450. I opened my contact list and scrolled down to Derek Vance. I hovered my thumb over the name for a second. Then, I pressed delete. He was gone. He wasn't just divorced. He wasn't just broke. He was a felon, buried under the weight of his own lies. The twist hadn't been a forgery. The twist was that he never understood who he was playing against. He thought he was playing poker. He didn't realize I was playing chess. And I had seen checkmate 10 moves ago. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking a rhythm of absolute, unadulterated freedom. The nightmare was over. The future was waiting. The sentencing hearing was brief, clinical, and devoid of the drama that had characterized the trial. There were no weeping outbursts, no surprise witnesses, and no last-minute revelations. There was only Judge Harrison, a man who viewed the law as a mathematical equation that must always balance, reading from a sheet of paper. Derek Vance was sentenced to 3 years in a federal correctional facility for wire fraud, perjury, and aggravated identity theft. When the gavel fell, it made a dull, wooden thud that sounded less like a judgment and more like a book being closed. Derek did not scream. He did not look at me. He simply slumped in his chair, the orange fabric of his county jail jumpsuit bunching around his shoulders, looking like a marionette whose strings had been cut. As the marshals led him away, he seemed to shrink, disappearing through the side door into a world where his charm and his business degrees would be worth absolutely nothing. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I felt a quiet, hollow exhaustion, like a runner who has crossed the finish line of a marathon only to realize they have to walk all the way home. The aftermath of a war is never just about the soldiers who fought. It is about the civilians caught in the crossfire. For Derek, the punishment did not end at the prison walls. The ripples of his destruction spread outward, drowning the only people who had ever unconditionally loved him. 2 months into his sentence, I received a phone call from a number I recognized but had not seen in years. It was Martha Vance, Derek's mother. Martha was a kind woman, a retired schoolteacher who baked lemon bars and sent handwritten birthday cards. She and her husband, Frank, had always been good to me, even if they were blind to their son's faults. When I answered the phone, I expected anger. I expected a mother defending her child, accusing me of being heartless. Instead, I heard sobbing. "Elena," she choked out, "we have to sell the house." I sat down at my kitchen island, the cold marble pressing against my palms. "Martha, what happened?" "The debts," she whispered. "Those men, the ones Derek borrowed money from in London, they sold the debt to a collection agency here, an aggressive one. They say Derek listed us as co-signers on some emergency promissory note he forged before he left. They have been calling us day and night. They are threatening to put a lien on our pension." I closed my eyes. Even from behind bars, Derek was still stealing. He had likely used his parents' information in a desperate bid to get cash before his flight to London, knowing full well he couldn't pay it back. "We have to sell the house to pay them off and cover his legal fees," Martha cried. "He has no one else. Elena, the lawyer said if we do not pay, they will extend his sentence. Frank is heartbroken. We bought this house 40 years ago." I listened to her weep, a woman in her 70s losing her sanctuary because she raised a son who believed he was entitled to the world. I wanted to help them. My instinct was to write a check, to use the funds I had saved to stop this bleeding, but I stopped myself. If I paid his debts, I would be enabling the cycle to continue. I would be cleaning up his mess one last time, and I had sworn that I was done being the janitor of Derek Vance's life. "I am so sorry, Martha," I said softly. I truly am. But I cannot help you. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for a long time. That was the true cost of his greed. It wasn't just the money. It was the dignity of two elderly people who would now spend their twilight years in a rented apartment, wondering where they went wrong. Isabella fared no better. The world, I discovered, has a very short memory for victims, but a very long memory for accomplices. She had testified against Derek. Yes, but her immunity deal only protected her from prison, not from society. The live stream she had broadcast from London, the one that had gone viral and destroyed Derek, had also destroyed her. The internet is a cruel historian. Search results for Isabella Martinez were dominated by headlines like "The Mistress Who Live-Streamed Her Downfall" and "Gold Digger Tells All." She tried to stay in Seattle. She applied for administrative jobs, receptionist roles, even retail positions, but every hiring manager did a background check. No reputable company wanted to hire a woman who was famous for helping a fraudster embezzle corporate funds. Even if she turned on him in the end. I heard through the grapevine that she lasted 3 months before the rent, and the shame drove her out. She packed her bags and moved back to her hometown in rural Wisconsin. The last update I saw was on a mutual acquaintance's feed, a blurry photo of Isabella wearing a hairnet, working the counter at a highway diner. She looked older. She looked tired. The glamorous life she had tried to steal had chewed her up and spit her back out exactly where she started, only with more scars. 6 months into his sentence, I decided to go to prison. It was not a decision I made lightly. Arthur Sterling advised against it. "You have won, Elena," he had said. "Why pick at the scab?" But I needed to see it. I needed to see the end of the story with my own eyes to believe it was truly over. I needed to know that the monster under my bed was just a man in a cage. The federal prison was a gray, imposing complex that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. I went through the security checkpoints, surrendering my phone, my purse, and my dignity, until I sat in a booth divided by a thick sheet of reinforced glass. I waited. When the door on the other side opened, I almost didn't recognize him. Derek had been shaved bald. The expensive hair transplants he had gotten 2 years ago were gone, revealing the scalp beneath. He had lost at least 20 pounds. His skin was sallow, the healthy tan of the golf course replaced by the pallor of confinement. He walked with a shuffle, his eyes darting around nervously as if he expected to be hit. He sat down. He picked up the black receiver. I picked up mine. "Elena," he said. His voice was raspy. "You came." "I came," I said evenly. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for something pity, perhaps, or a flicker of the old affection. "I knew you would come. I knew you still cared. You are the only one. Everyone else, Isabella. My friends, they all abandoned me. Even my parents hardly call anymore." He didn't know they were selling their house to pay for his crimes. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. "It is hard in here, he continued, leaning closer to the glass. "You have no idea. The food, the people, it is a nightmare. I do not belong here. You know I do not belong here. It was a mistake, just a series of bad calls. The market turned on me. If that crypto investment had hit, none of this would have happened. We will be in London right now." I listened to him, fascinated by the durability of his delusion, even here, wearing a jumpsuit number. He was rewriting reality. It wasn't his fault. It was the market. It was bad luck. "I have been thinking a lot," he said, tears starting to well up in his eyes. "About us. I made a mess of things. I know that. But I can fix it. When I get out in 2 years with good behavior, we could start over. I have ideas. Business ideas. I just need a little seed capital. You still have the money, right? The $650,000, if you just held on to it for me, we could—" I placed my hand gently against the cold glass, interrupting him. "Derek," I said. He stopped, a flicker of hope lighting up his face. "Yes. Look at me." He looked. "You are not crying because you are sorry," I said, my voice calm and devoid of anger. "You are crying because you are uncomfortable. You are crying because you got caught. No, that is not true." He protested, a tear rolling down his cheek. "I love you, Elena. I always loved you." I shook my head slowly. "No, you never loved me. You loved the way I fixed things. You loved the safety I provided. You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my bank account. You loved my money. Derek, that was the only thing about me that ever truly excited you." He opened his mouth to argue, but I pressed on. "And now," I said, "you do not have the money, and because you do not have the money, you do not have me. You do not have your parents' respect. You do not have your freedom. You have nothing." I stood up. The chair scraped against the linoleum floor. "Elena, wait," he panicked, slamming his hand against the glass. "Do not leave me here. I need money for the commissary. I need a lawyer for the appeal, Elena." I looked down at him one last time. I didn't feel the urge to scream at him. I didn't feel the need to list his crimes. I just felt a profound, heavy sadness for a waste of a human life. He was a black hole that had tried to consume everything around him, and now he had collapsed in on himself. "This is the price of greed, Derek," I said. "You bought this life. Now you have to live in it." I hung up the receiver. I turned and walked toward the exit. I could hear him screaming my name through the glass. A muffled, distorted sound that grew fainter with every step. "Elena, Elena." When I pushed open the heavy steel doors and stepped out into the prison parking lot, the silence of the outside world was deafening. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. A bird was singing on a wire fence. I took a deep breath. My chest expanded, and for the first time in 6 months. There was no tightness. The stone that had been sitting on my heart crumbled into dust and blew away. I was free, truly, completely free. I didn't hate him, I pitied him, and pity is the final death of love. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the prison in the rearview mirror until it was just a gray smudge on the horizon. A week later, I sat in the office of the Dean of the University of Washington's Business School. On the desk between us lay a check. It was a cashier's check for $500,000. I had kept $150,000 for my self-reimbursement for the legal fees, the rent penalties, and the cost of rebuilding my life. That was fair. That was survival. But the rest was tainted. It was the money Derek had tried to steal. It was the money that had destroyed his family. It felt heavy in my account, like carrying a stone from a grave. I didn't want to buy a car with it. I didn't want to buy a house. I wanted to burn it. Metaphorically speaking, I wanted to transform it from a symbol of greed into a symbol of hope. "We are incredibly moved by this donation, Ms. Vance," the dean said, looking at the check with wide eyes. "This will change a lot of lives. Do you have a name for the scholarship?" "Yes," I said. I thought about the fire that had burned down my life. I thought about the ashes of my marriage, the charred remains of my trust, and I thought about the woman who had risen from those ashes stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. "The Phoenix Fund," I said. "The Phoenix Fund," the dean repeated, writing it down. "And what are the criteria for the recipients?" "It is for students who have no safety net," I explained. "Students who are working 2 jobs to pay tuition. Students who have no parents to bail them out. No trust funds to fall back on. I want this money to go to the people who know the value of $1 because they have had to bleed for it." "It will be done," the dean promised. I walked out onto the campus quad. It was autumn, and the leaves were turning gold and crimson. Students were rushing to class, their faces full of anxiety and ambition. Somewhere in that crowd was a young woman like I used to be, scared, determined, and alone, and soon she would get a letter saying that someone believed in her enough to lift the burden from her shoulders. I smiled. It was a small, private smile. Derek Vance had tried to use that money to destroy a life. I was using it to build one. The ledger was finally balanced. The debt was paid. and as I walked through the falling leaves, I realized that the best revenge wasn't seeing him in prison. The best revenge was turning his ugliness into something beautiful. 2 years is a strange amount of time. In the grand scheme of the universe, it is a blink of an eye. But in the life of a woman who has rebuilt herself from the ground up, 2 years is a lifetime. I stood on the balcony of my corner office on the 30th floor, looking out over the city of Seattle. The sign on the glass door behind me read, Vance Strategic Wealth Management. It was no longer a dream or a frantic plan hatched in a coffee shop. It was real. It was mine. I left Apex Capital 6 months ago. They were a great firm, and they had given me the platform I needed to restore my reputation. But working for someone else no longer suited me. I had spent too many years managing Derek's ego and cleaning up his messes. I needed to build something that carried my name, my values, and my vision. My firm was small, boutique, and fiercely protective of its clients. We specialized in forensic accounting and asset protection for women going through high-conflict divorces. I was not just their financial advisor, I was their shield. Every time a woman walked into my office, terrified that her husband was hiding money or threatening to leave her destitute, I saw a reflection of myself, and every time I found the hidden accounts or secured their settlements, I felt a little more of the old scars fading away. Ms. Vance. I turned. My assistant, a bright young man named Leo, was standing in the doorway. Your 3 o'clock appointment was canceled, but you have a personal visitor in the lobby. He says he knows you have a standing date with the lake. I smiled. I checked my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. Tell him I will be down in 5 minutes, I said. I grabbed my trench coat. The Seattle autumn had arrived in full force, painting the city in shades of burnt orange and deep gold. It was my favorite time of year. It was the season of change, of letting go of the dead leaves to make room for new growth. I walked out of the building and into the crisp air. Standing near the fountain, wearing a camel-colored wool coat and a scarf I had knitted for him last Christmas, was Julian. Julian was not Derek. He was the antithesis of Derek, where Derek was loud. Julian was quiet, where Derek was flashy. Julian was understated, where Derek sucked the oxygen out of a room. Julian was the fresh air. He had been the junior associate at Arthur Sterling's firm, the one who had sifted through thousands of pages of bank statements with me late into the night. He had seen me at my absolute lowest, crying, angry, terrified, and vindictive, and he had stayed. He didn't make a move for the first year. He simply checked in. He sent me articles about finance. He met me for coffee and let me talk about the trauma of the betrayal without offering empty platitudes. He waited until I stopped looking over my shoulder, until I stopped flinching when a phone rang. He waited until I was whole. "You are late," Julian said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as I approached. "I am the boss," I teased, slipping my hand into the crook of his arm. "I run on my own time." "Fair enough," he laughed. "Walk with me." We walked toward Lake Washington. The path was covered in a carpet of maple leaves that crunched satisfyingly under our boots. The water was choppy, reflecting the gray-blue of the sky, but the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a warm golden spotlight on the water. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. That was the thing about Julian. Silence with him wasn't empty, it was companionable. "I saw the quarterly reports for your firm," Julian said eventually. "You are up 30% year over year. Sterling is jealous. He says you are stealing all his best clients." "Sterling can handle it," I replied, feeling a surge of pride. "Besides, he charges too much." Julian chuckled. "He does, but he taught me well." "How is the partner track going?" I asked. "It is good," Julian said, but his voice had a slight tremor in it, a nervous edge. I looked at him. Julian was rarely nervous. He was the most composed man I knew. "Is everything okay?" "You seem fidgety." He stopped walking. We were near a wooden bench overlooking the marina, the same spot where we had shared our first real non-business conversation 18 months ago. "I want to show you something," Julian said. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a thick manila envelope. My stomach did a small flip. Envelopes usually meant legal trouble. They meant subpoenas, divorce decrees, or bad news. "Relax," Julian said, seeing the tension in my shoulders. "It is not a lawsuit. I promise." I took the envelope. It felt heavy. I undid the string closure and slid the documents out. The first thing I saw was a photograph clipped to the front. It was a picture of a house, a small, Victorian-style house with a wraparound porch and a garden that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, and the roof needed work, but I would know those windows anywhere. It was 42 Oak Street, my grandmother's house, the house I had sold 6 years ago to fund my life with Derek. The house whose proceeds had become the $650,000 that saved me. I had driven past it a few times since the divorce, but it always hurt too much to look. It had been sold to a developer who planned to tear it down, but the market shift had stalled the demolition. I looked at the document behind the photo. It was a deed. Grantee Julian H., Thorne and Elena Vance, as joint tenants. I stared at the names. My hand flew to my mouth. I looked up at Julian, my vision suddenly blurring with tears. "You bought it," I whispered. "Julian, this is prime real estate. This must have cost a fortune." "The developer was over-leveraged," Julian explained, his voice soft and earnest. "I negotiated. I know how much you regretted selling it. I know you felt like you traded your history to buy your freedom." "I did," I said, a tear escaping and tracking down my cheek. "I felt like I betrayed her. My grandmother." "You did what you had to do to survive," Julian said firmly. He reached out and wiped the tear away with his thumb. His hand was warm. "But you do not have to survive anymore. Elena, you get to live now." He tapped the document. "I did not buy it to give it to you," he clarified. "I did not want to be the man who buys you things to prove his worth. We both know you can buy 10 of these houses on your own now." I nodded, unable to speak. "I bought it so we could fix it," Julian said. "Together. It needs a new roof. The plumbing is a disaster. The garden is a jungle. It is going to take months of hard work, weekends covered in dust, and probably a few arguments about paint colors." He took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "I do not want to give you a finished product, Elena. I want to build a home with you. I want us to sand the floors and paint the walls. I want to fill it with new memories, not just preserve the old ones. I want to plant a garden that grows because we water it." I looked back at the photo of the house. I saw the porch where my grandmother used to sit and brush my hair. I saw the window of the room where I had dreamed of becoming a writer before I became a financier. But more than that, I saw the future. I saw Julian and me on ladders, laughing as we tried to hang wallpaper. I saw Sunday mornings with coffee on that porch. I saw a life that wasn't about hiding money or tracking lies. I saw a life that was about construction, not destruction. "You put my name on the deed," I said. "You haven't even asked me if I want to renovate a money pit with you." "I am a lawyer," Julian smiled, that slow, confident smile that made my heart race. "I never ask a question unless I am reasonably sure of the answer. So do you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had waited for me to heal, who had respected my scars without trying to erase them. "Yes," I said. "Yes, let's rebuild it." He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. I breathed in the scent of him, rain, wool, and safety. I held him tight, feeling the solid beat of his heart against mine. For so long, I had defined myself by my revenge. I was the woman who outsmarted Derek Vance. I was the woman who won. I was the phoenix who rose from the ashes. But as I stood there by the lake, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, I realized that revenge is just a season. It is a harsh, cold winter that kills the weeds. But you cannot live in winter forever. Eventually, you have to let the spring come. Derek was gone. He was a number in a federal register, a ghost of a bad dream. He didn't matter anymore. His punishment was his own life. My reward was this. It was the warmth of Julian's hand. It was the deed to my grandmother's house. It was the knowledge that I could trust again. "Come on," Julian said, pulling back and taking my hand. "Let's go see it. I have the keys." "Right now?" I laughed. "Right now. We have a lot of work to do before it gets dark." We turned and walked along the path, heading toward the parking lot. The sun was dipping below the horizon, setting the sky on fire with streaks of violet and pink. It was the kind of sunset that makes you stop and stare, the kind that promises that tomorrow will be even brighter. I didn't look back at the city. I didn't look back at the past. I squeezed Julian's hand, and he squeezed back. The revenge was perfect, but happiness. The happiness was infinite, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't calculating the cost. I was just enjoying the value. Thank you so much for listening to this entire journey of Elena Vance. It has been a roller coaster of emotions, from the heartbreak at the airport to the final triumph by the lake. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Seattle or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Please drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on Elena's choice to forgive herself and move on. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Crimson Drama Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and smash the hype button so this video can reach more people who need to hear that it is possible to rise from the ashes. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.